Tervitus kõigile, hello everyone. Let's begin with this discussion. And first of all, I would like to ask how many of you are only English native speakers who don't speak Estonian. Raise your hands, please. We have about 10 altogether. Well, I'm glad to see you here. We're going to do it in English because this is going up on my YouTube channel later and this is an international audience. So, of course, let's begin with introduction. Could you introduce yourself?
My name is Kaimo Kuusk. I was Estonian ambassador to Ukraine from 2019 to 2023, 31st of July. So I'm at the moment ambassador designated to Lithuania. So currently doing my job in diplomacy.
And my name is REHI. I am an Estonian military blogger and my military blog is on YouTube, so it's in video formats. I do it in English and I've been doing it since the start of the war. It's a semi-daily blog. Almost every day I upload and my viewers are from United States, England, Germany, Australia, New Zealand and most of the Western countries, NATO countries and European Union. Today we're going to discuss the topic of Ukrainian victory. What does it mean to both sides, to the world, to NATO? What does Ukraine need for its victory? And we're going to open up these topics from there. So, first of all, actually, I would like to ask you the question. It's a very broad question. Right now, in this moment, in the summer, with the counteroffensive going on, what do you think Ukraine needs the most to achieve victory?
Well, first, let's start with the basic facts. This current war has lasted already 10th year. It's almost 10 years.
2014, yeah.
Exactly. So then it started. Large-scale war started a year and a half, roughly, ago. What this war is about, it's authoritarian imperialistic state attacked democratic nation state Ukraine. So it's a very clear cut war in that sense. There's no equal sides. There's no well, we need to give word for both sides in that sense. So those are the basic facts. So for Ukraine, the win means that they will get back what they have lost since 2014. It's first people, because Russia has deported lots of people, kids, but also adults from occupied territories. It's about territory, to get back all territory what they have lost in Donbas, Crimea, half of the Zaporizhia Oblast and Kherson Oblast at the moment. It's about justice, because as we had a panel before, we talked about accountability. Those who launched the war, those who committed the atrocities should be judged, sentenced, whatever. And the fourth thing is definitely those who started the war need to pay for that, need to pay for Ukraine to build things which have been damaged back, build back better. I like this US originated sentence actually. So it's once again, we're very proud we did the kindergarten and we built it back better. We didn't renovate 60-year-old kindergarten, which corner was damaged, let's say. So these four things are victory for Ukraine, Ukrainians as well. So majority of Ukrainians support that. And that means very, very high percentage. You are going to, in a street in Ukraine, talk with the locals, or the half of our staff in embassy were locals. You are asking from them how they feel, what they need for victory, and what they mean about victory. That's exactly the same. despite that they are tired, they losing their close ones, that's victory for Ukraine.
And already you mentioned these 4 different categories that need to be achieved in case of Ukrainian victory, and one of them was getting back the people deported. One of them was paying the war reparations. Well, I don't see Russia as an imperialistic authoritarian country, even if they lose in Ukraine and remain one intact country, paying reparations or sending Ukrainian people back or allow themselves to be sent back or go home. How is it even possible for Russia to lose without being cut to pieces, to retain their one country system, their political system and command structure, and lose this war? Would there have to be a goodwill gesture?
Well, we're not starting to cut Russia, at least it's not the first priority, let's say. Let's leave it later, I guess.
I'm rushing ahead of myself.
Yeah, well, that means victory, actually, that we need to support Ukraine to reach to achieve those goals. So Ukraine is not alone, and that's one of the most important things I think happened during the last year and a half, that they didn't been left alone. Like we found ourselves, Estonians, in 1939, we found ourselves to be left alone. And then we lost our independence. Although Ukrainians want to get into NATO very much, actually, more than 80%, it's not so quick. But the important part from this, you are not getting to today and tomorrow to NATO. Important part is that you are not alone. We are supporting you. We Estonians, G7, Nordic, Baltic countries, the free world actually supports. So this coalition of the free world, not only actually, there's some interesting semi ones as well who are interested in that international law will be followed, will join us in that bid against Russia as well, actually. So it's not easy. The law part was discussed previous panel, but we need to go on with the attitude that how, not if.
Yes, truly how, not if. It's going to happen, but it takes time. It's a very slow process, as you mentioned, the laws. For example, the frozen Russian assets in the EU and in the United States, they reach hundreds of billions. I think it was 300 billion USD when I looked at the number latest, and it's a huge sum of money, and a lot of the people on the streets are saying, yes, just give it to Ukraine. Well, I guess you listened to that law discussion before. How difficult would that process be, and would it be justified to give all of that Russian frozen assets to Ukraine when the war is over?
Yeah, well, the sum is really big. I think the sum for majority here is so big. I personally can't understand physically how big is the sum. 3 billion.
300 billion.
300 billion.
300
exactly.
billion. 3,000 million.
In my previous career, I have seen once 1 million euros in one suitcase.
Whoa!
Impressive.
Tell the story,
impressive.
Yeah.
So when I'm thinking of that, I will count it to 300,000 suitcases of the same size.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so we have a scheme. Estonian Foreign Ministry, Ministry of Justice, State Chancellery probably as well have worked out a scheme actually how this will work, how we can use Russian arrested assets to direct them to Ukraine to
I understand
help them to rebuild.
This scheme is only in Estonia. We're trying to promote this scheme for other countries in the EU to accept it. Is that correct?
If you are small, your only option is to be first. So we, as a example builders. Be it reconstruction, be it a scheme how to get Russian money for Ukrainians. We are the first ones.
Well, I'm glad we are the first. I hope the EU and the United States will accept this scheme, because it's, in my eyes at least, as a simple person viewing this war, this would be justified. If somebody is aggressive and does damage, then there's these assets that need to be allocated to Ukraine to rebuild the country. Now there's another question, if these assets are just to be sent to Ukraine. There is the question of corruption, of course, which maybe is a little bit brushed under the table, or these assets perhaps to be used for European construction companies to be sent to Ukraine, so the money flows through Western companies. There's all of these details that need to be settled.
I think those mechanisms will be worked out, and the problem of corruption, it's there in Ukraine, but it has improved, definitely. I've been there 4 years. I've seen the progress during those 4 years, actually, to compare. Compare with Estonia in 90s, we had similar problems, so I had several times quite a deja vu feelings there, but things are improving. Today, important law was passed in Verkhovna Rada in Ukraine, so they are doing in that. So I would not, how to say, paralyze myself with horrible world corruption, that, hey, we can't do anything because there's a corruption. Everywhere actually is corruption. You need a mechanism to cope with that. So I think that will be solved somehow as well.
I will now bring in the topic of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. It started officially in June. It was hyped up all over the world from the official channels and also on unofficial Ukrainian supporters like NAFO, if you have heard about them. Everybody was waiting for it. Everybody was imagining the results to be like Kharkiv offensive, like Kherson offensive, which were very successful. Ukrainian troops used a very aggressive tactic of just sending the armor and tanks very close to the Russian positions, and it made the Russians flee. And the same tactic was used now with the counteroffensive, and unfortunately Russians were very entrenched, very heavily the areas were mined, and we got the first footage of destroyed Leopard tanks, destroyed infantry fighting vehicles, Bradleys, and it really saddened me to see this. I also was very much hoping this would be the same kind of counteroffensive. Can you elaborate on what went wrong in June?
Nothing went wrong. Things are going actually in the right way. Of course, it's very sad when you see your own ones being killed, and the technique, the tools damaged. In Ukraine have participated a couple of funerals, Estonian volunteers who have been killed, or battalion heads who I know very well, and they lost their life fighting Russians. So it makes you sad, but that's war.
Yeah.
This is war, and equipment, weapons are being damaged. So if we started with the question, what is needed for victory? It's weapons. It's weapons, weapons, and weapons. It's force. If you are in war, diplomacy is not helping. It's force. Diplomacy without power, without force is not functioning. So it's weapons, it's maintenance, because I've talked with Ukrainian militaries. This is absolutely normal that you have 20 to 25% of your artillery or your armored vehicles or tanks out of order, damaged. They need to be repaired. And Ukrainians are absolutely marvelous on that. You can imagine they are 3D printing spare parts close to front line for their tanks and artillery. 3D printing. We are 3D printing, I don't know, cups. Here, they are printing spare parts for
drones,
777 artilleries, actually. So they need those weapons, and well, they got damaged. But what is most important is that the crews are alive. It's not the Soviet tanks which will burn your crew in. They are built to save your team members actually, and that's what keeps the morale up. About the hype, I think what have been done in social media during the winter and spring, the Rasputitsa season, when there's a muddy season, you can't go forward with the heavy artillery. To keep your morale high, you are feeding the expectations actually, trying
it's also
to
information warfare to take away from the Russian side, to keep them on their toes, to keep them afraid, to keep them expecting the sudden attack all the time.
So that's the part of the war as well. That's sometimes called also fog of war. That you mix already some messages which are to support your own morale with the real facts on the field actually. So that came in. Russians prepared because when Ukrainians were able to took back the Kherson and Kharkiv, half of the Kherson Oblast and Kharkiv Oblast. Then Russians still planned to get half of the Ukraine by the end of the year. This year, they understood that they have to fix the front lines. So they had time to mine the fields. Ukraine is the most heavily mined country in the world. 200,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian soil is wasted with explosives and mines. 200,000 square kilometers. Estonia, 45,000 square kilometers. So it's 4 to 5 times more than Estonian territory is covered with something nasty, which can bite you. So Russians had time to do that. So it's not a walk in the park. So I'm optimist by nature. So Ukrainians are fighting a smart way at the moment. They will get it.
One awesome story that is connected to these mines is Ukraine actually doesn't have their own production of these vehicles. I'm sure you've seen the videos which shoot out a string filled with explosives and they destroy the minefields at like 100-meter gap into the minefields. But Ukraine captured about 15 of these vehicles from Kharkiv in Izium. So they didn't have them before, but they now have them captured from the Russians and they're using them against the Russians in the southern front. So that's a very necessary capability that now have, and the West is also sending a little bit more. But another weapon that illustrates how much Ukraine actually needs Western aid is the F-16. Everybody's heard about it, everybody's talking about it, when it's going to come. The United States is saying, okay, we are not the bottleneck anymore, 4 or 5 months. Well, Russians have this newest attack helicopter, the Ka-52 Alligator. This helicopter is unfortunately, I have to say, very good and very capable, and it can shoot very effectively and very precisely their missiles about 10 kilometers from the front, meaning that Ukrainian manpads, shoulder-fired anti-air capabilities cannot shoot it down because their range is 3 to 4 kilometers. Now, these rockets, these precise rockets can destroy Ukrainian armor very effectively. The only thing that Ukraine could do against this Ka-52 is an F-16 with their superior radars, which can shoot down this chopper 100 kilometers away, 50 kilometers away. The radar sees 300 kilometers away. But they don't have these F-16 right now, so they cannot move their Western armored brigades, which have Leopards, which have Bradleys, because they would be cannon fodder. And this is why we see about 8 Ukrainian brigades still not moving out to this counteroffensive, because Ukraine doesn't want to waste them. So this is how important it is to send the F-16. And right now it's about 5 months away, maybe.
Well, before elaborating training the pilots, where the pilots are skillful, I still start to answer that one. Pilots are very skillful. Ukrainian pilots are really, really good. What they lack is English language knowledge. So they have turned to Estonia as well to help with language teaching, for example. So some of the time takes that one as well, but I'm pretty confident that they will learn quickly, and the planes will come. Ukrainians are smart, and I love them. That's the second thing beyond dark humor. What they have is the smartness. They are so smart. They have used their own produced Stugna, the anti-armor
Wire-guided
missile against those same helicopters. When the helicopters stand still to shoot, be it Ukrainian tank, for example, they are easy target for Stugnas. So Ukrainians have combined the British Storm Shadow cruise missiles with last century Su-24s, which nobody believed that they are able to do. But they are. They are technically skilled, they are engineers. I call it steampunk, actually, thinking of this last century planes carrying the most modern cruise missile. So still, I'm optimistic. Ukrainians are smart. They find the way out of that moment. In a war, you want everything to reach you yesterday. That's, of course, also clear.
Yes, you mentioned Storm Shadow fitted to Su-24. Was it the plane? Yes, Su-24, and also to elaborate on Storm Shadow, it is such a necessary weapon system because it has an incredible stealth capability, meaning that Russia so far has not been able to shoot down a single Storm Shadow missile, none of them. So Russia does not have an effective response to Storm Shadow, which makes it one of the only weapon systems that Ukraine has that Russia has no answer to whatsoever. The issue is it's 2.1 million British pounds, one Storm Shadow. So it's incredibly expensive, but it is also incredibly accurate. The minus side is that Ukraine has so few of them. That is why people are accusing Germany of not sending their Taurus missiles, which are similar, with the similar capabilities, but Germany is reluctant to sell them. So I'm bringing in the German part of this. Maybe you can open up why they are a little bit maybe slower or taking their time to catch up.
This is a question for Chancellor Scholz, of course,
yeah.
more than for me, but I can start why we, Estonia, we have given so much. We help Ukrainians because of us. First of all, we help them because of us. Because if they are losing, we will be in trouble. So that's why we are not hesitating giving as much as possible. And if sometimes some politicians say that we have given everything, don't believe them. Zelensky also doesn't believe. When we meet Zelensky, he looks at our president after breaking ice with some jokes and saying that, well, we know you have these CV-90s. We know exact numbers, how many you have, those armored fighting vehicles. Please give them to us. We will give them back later if possible. So there's different logics behind. There's some nations who don't have this urgency. We are bordering the empire. We have been under occupation of this empire. We know what nasty things they are able to do. So that's why we want Ukraine to win. The same with Poland, Lithuania, Latvia. The Poland feels, senses the historical possibility to turn the 300 years tide, actually. It started from the Peter the Great, what was also touched previous panel. Well, Germany is far away, the other countries as well, but still they have given because, at the end of the day, what matters is whether the rule-based world functions or not. Of course, we need to convince them. We need to show example, Estonians showing examples as well, that we are taking risks, giving all our Taut howitzers away. And German 9 will turn to German Jawohl in some moment.
Yes, and you mentioned Poland, actually. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, of course, being border nations to Russia and being the eastern border of European Union, northern eastern border. We know the urgency, but then there is Poland, who is on another level. They recently raised their military spending from the country's GDP to 3.9%, which is for the Western democratic countries incredibly high, one of the highest. And if this war wasn't going on, they would have done the same thing. We would right now be worried that a new regional superpower is in the making, because what they are buying from South Korea and from United States, the tanks, the howitzers, the planes, Poland, at least what I think with my primitive understanding, in the next 20 years they will be the regional superpower and the geopolitics will be revolving around them. So I mean, we are next to Russia, we feel the same urgency, but why and how is Poland able to do this more than us?
Poland has similar history, and I'm not worried Poland gaining power. After UK leaving EU, we need something who can fight as well in the EU. So Poland definitely uses the possibility to bolster itself with helping also Ukraine everything they can actually to finish this threat from the Eastern Empire, at least for generations. So that's what makes them going. What motivates them. This is for sure.
Yes, if I think about, for example, taking a loan in Estonia or taking a loan from the bank and buying real estate, you think 30 years ahead because you have to pay that loan back for 30 years. And then you began to think, okay, we're in Estonia, Russian threats, 30 years, what about the long-term investment in Estonia? And then I see Poland and I feel a little bit safer because they are getting strong and big, and I like the way they're going, and I feel like Germany should go a little bit more that way. Spain, France, England, all of these countries who have neglected their militaries in the last 30 years because we have had this relative time of peace in Europe, which is beautiful, but now we're carrying the burden of it.
Yeah, peace from our perspective, but for Russia, there's no such thing as a peacetime.
Yeah.
They are using these relatively calm periods to prepare for the next hot war. Their special services have such a doctrine. I will humbly remind that we are NATO. So we are in NATO and we are NATO. So that gives us the safety. And I'm super happy about our Finnish neighbors as well, because they now join NATO and they are safer. They can feel safer as well, actually, now since this spring.
Yeah, this goes to the podcast later when it goes uploaded. I want to say Suomi mainitu, torilla tavataan, kiitos to the Finnish friends for joining NATO, because honestly, living in Estonia, knowing the situation on our northern border, we don't have a proper military navy, we don't have a proper military air force. So Finland joining NATO, knowing they will buy the F-35 from America, I'm feeling safer already. Yeah, and I hope Sweden will join also.
We are good discussion pair, actually. I'm feeling happy about Finns and you are about ourselves as well.
Yeah. Okay, now I can bring in the topic of, recently there was a coup in Niger, in Africa. People are saying the new Cold War is already happening. The war front is European continent, there's China, there's Taiwan, and then there's Africa. There was a coup, and the makers of the coup, the general asked Wagner to come and restore peace in the country. They asked Wagner, which is the extension, now we know, of the Russian armed forces. Wagner basically is the Russian armed forces, and they do the dirty work of Putin. If they are asked to join Niger, to join their army and guard peace there, would that be seen as a Russian victory in Africa, in one of the countries at least?
Maybe a battle or two, not the entire victory. So once again, they think that they will harm us, the West, free world, by creating controlled chaos somewhere. Well, chaos is not controllable. That's the essence of chaos. So I think the Russian principle or Russian view on that has been wrong for a long time. Wagner, troublemakers, absolutely, I agree. Connected with GIU, so knew already for a long time that they are not some independent bicycle repair company. They are the long hand of the GIU actually. So when trouble, then being stopped somehow. It's not public yet, but the question is interesting why they stopped in one midsummer weekend going towards Moscow. So now they are in Belarus partly, and they are making the nasty things in Africa. So that's challenge, but not how to say long term, not a critical one actually for the West or the free world.
Yeah, you mentioned it's maybe a loss of battle, not the war. I'm glad to hear it, and I hope it is that way. 2 days ago, I read a report from Twitter that Lukashenko refused to pay for the camps built for Wagner. So he really doesn't like these troops in his country. He's a very unpopular leader in Belarus, and Wagner troops hold the potential for weaponized uprising against his regime, because he's nothing more than a Putin's puppet, and if Putin needed to change the regime, well, Wagner would be perhaps the tool. So we don't know what's going to happen in Wagner in Belarus, but I know that Lithuania and Poland are very nervous about it, that they are there.
I think Lukashenko is also very nervous about having Wagner in his soil. Actually, he went close to panic a few years ago when there was 31, 32 Wagner guys. It was Ukrainian Special Services ops to get them somehow, but Luka was very actually. Very nervous about that, and now making such a statement. If he really did it, I haven't seen it, but if he did, he acts like a real estate developer in a boom time actually, and I don't know whether Wagner even in his capacities what they have at the moment. Not 2 months ago they have something. It was something else than it is at the moment, but. Is Wagner such a customer whom you are saying that actually I'm not paying for the construction what we have created for you? So it's that's an interesting thing. But joking aside, I think what we can expect from Wagner in Belarus is some hybrid tricks. There are hints, or not hints. There are some signs that migrants are flowing in again from Middle East, from Africa to Belarus. And Wagner is a perfect tool to pressure them towards Poland and Lithuanian borders, to provoke something, you are planting some Wagner guys inside the group of those migrants, some shootings, so something like that I would expect from them in Belarus. They are not a military force to threaten Lithuania or Poland, not as such.
Yes, the last numbers I remember were about 4,000 Wagner fighters in Belarus, and Lukashenko's strong request was, and we can understand it, that if they come to Belarus, they have to leave all their armor, air force, and anti-air capabilities. So they could only take their personal firearms and trucks and go to Belarus. So this way Lukashenko doesn't have an armored force that is not under his control. And as you mentioned, the controlled chaos on the border to use the migrants as a weapon from Middle East and Syria and send them to Poland and Lithuania. And yesterday I read that Polish forces expanded the border guard to 10,000 additional troops. So they're taking this extremely seriously. And in a way, if this is Putin's goal to divert Polish resources to guard the border, because that takes away from some other stuff they have to do, well, then it's efficient, because Poland has to put enormous resources to keep the border safe.
For Poland, 10,000 guys, it's not enormous resources. For us, it's the biggest military exercise probably in history when we are having them, but not for Poland. Yeah. And Poland and Lithuania are absolutely in the best way being prepared for these kind of things compared to year 2021 when the last this crisis on the border was created by Lukashenko, who just demanded, or not demanded, he wanted the recognition. So he thought that if he will act like a screaming kid, he will get attention. Well, not working like that. The same goal seems to be this time as well. Lukashenko today announced that he gave government order to contact with Poland to start to talk about easing the situation in the border. It's absolutely the same. So Lukashenko wants to get out of isolation and non-recognition. So, yeah.
Lukashenko, I always remember in the COVID times. It was COVID, and at that time I was already following what he says, what Putin is saying. And Lukashenko likes to say incredibly stupid stuff on camera. He doesn't really care. So he was saying to get rid of COVID, you have to take a shot of vodka and go to sauna. And that is the official country's, the leader is saying this, you have to do this. It's easy, do it, take a shot and you're fine. This was his tone at the same time when, you know, millions were in COVID. So this is the guy we're talking about. But oh yeah.
Well, just a quick comment. But that's the example of dictators, the Lukashenko. We can laugh that when the guy is saying these stupid things into camera, nobody are able from his team or from nation to argue with him. They are not doing it. In case of Putin, writing absolutely stupid essays about history, but nobody comes to him and saying that, well, Mr. President, we think you are wrong. In case of empires and dictators, it's not working like that.
Putin is rewriting history. I recently saw a new published Russian history book for children, 1st grade to 5th grade, and the text in that was completely made up history. And they are learning this right now. It's the next generation in Russia who are learning from this book. They are totally, it's like North Korea. They're totally cut off from the actual history, and they're learning this Putin's made up history. And everybody who's saying that it isn't like that is flying out of the window in Russia. So you cannot really say anything against it. You only agree or you look down. So that's your only opinion in Russia, or to leave Russia, I guess. But I'll bring in a new topic now, which is a little bit controversial, if I'm okay to bring up controversy. It's the United States aid tempo to Ukraine. Looking at United States' different conflicts around the world, the capacity which the United States has, the logistical capacity, they are a logistical wizard. They are able to bring their forces and logistics into any part of the world in the matter of weeks and change the situation on the ground. They just have such capacity. In Ukraine, they have not used this capacity for some reason. I personally think the tempo is slow and it should be faster. But I cannot put my finger on it. Why is it so slow?
Well, now I'm still ambassador designated to Lithuania at the moment. So we have a US ambassador sitting in the audience, actually. So that's the question for him. As I said, I can describe only what drives us, why we have given javelins before the full-scale war started, putting Germans and Finns into embarrassing situation, saying that, hey, we want to give howitzers also before the full-scale war even started. Pretty sure the US has given really a lot without Patriots. You know how we partied in Kiev embassy of Estonia when, thanks to Patriots, 6 Kinzhals were taken down above our heads. It's the crazy noise and crazy moments you are feeling, but you are super happy that thanks to US technology, you are able to take down those Wunder armament, as we discussed before. Well, there's their own logic how they are operating. I mean, the US giving the aid, and that's their logic actually. So, but the most important is they are giving it, and they are giving it in a sum actually the biggest amount. That's definitely the case.
I want to thank you for being also so balancing all the time. When I bring something up, you answer with such optimism that I'm really thankful for it. Honestly, I also want to clear up that very thankful for all of the hate given, but I'm asking the question to provoke an answer, and very we're on the same page on this a lot.
Yeah, I can recognize that. That's interesting. One of Ukrainian journalists told me that, hey, I'm protecting Zelensky, and he asking very critical questions actually. So it's, well, I can only say in excuse of myself that I'm just coming from Ukraine actually, and I'm totally into that society. I try to understand what is the logic behind something, what are the driving forces of different parties actually.
Yes, I have been to Ukraine 3 times now only, and only been to Kiev, and the city is absolutely beautiful and marvelous, and I'm fallen in love with that city. Every time it's very difficult to leave, so yeah.
So driving back to this, what victory means for Ukraine is that Ukraine wants to be sovereign, independent, and those beautiful Ukrainian cities, starting from Kyiv, you mentioned Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk, Chernihiv, it's beautiful, beautiful places. I hope there's no Spanish ambassador or diplomat here, because one of my bodyguards, first time I was experiencing to live with bodyguards, a year and a half in Kiev and in Ukraine. The first team member of the bodyguards in Kiev, after 3 weeks, said that, well, you know, Mr. Ambassador, before coming here, I was in honeymoon with my wife in Barcelona, and I have to admit, Kiev is much cooler than Barcelona.
I have to agree. Being visiting both, I would choose Kiev. And perhaps we will take the final topic before we can ask questions. I mean, you can ask questions, not we. We can ask you questions. Yeah.
We already asked a question.
One question already being prepared. So let's talk about the timetable or the timeline. You mentioned to me privately before that you think Ukraine will reach the Azov Sea with this fall, which is 6 months from now, pretty much. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I was more optimistic in spring as well, actually. I didn't calculate it in those minefields, those 3 lines of defenses, sometimes 4 lines, that the minefields will take the tempo down. So I thought that the Ukrainian gains will be quicker. At the moment, seeing them still think fighting smartly, they will reach the Azov, and then things will start to happen. They will isolate Crimea. Well, they will get it back, but in that sense, I'm optimistic Ukraine will, but the victory is not coming this year.
Yeah, isolating Crimea. Recently, they started attacking the Kerch Bridge again, the Chonhar Bridge, all of the logistics chains going from Sevastopol to southern Ukraine. It's seeing that they're changing the pattern, striking logistics very heavily. And we saw the same kind of pattern before the Kherson offensive, which was very effective thanks to that. So I am hoping something big soon, very much so. But I don't right now have anything else to add. So perhaps we should accept.
We have. Don't listen him. Yeah. We have, but we give the floor for the questions.
Okay. Perhaps, do you have a microphone? Do any of you guys have a microphone laying around? If you don't, you can just say the question out loud and I will repeat it. Oh, you have a microphone.
Hi, my name is Kalev Kallemets. I'm an EFO fellow. I was in Vilnius and an NAFO meeting. First off, I would I think, Kaimo, you have been beyond the Call of Duty ambassador for Estonia in Ukraine. So I want to thank you for that, and everybody please applaud him. I really mean it, that you have been really, really great in many decisions that you also described. But what I'm asking myself is what I can personally do more. Of course, I donate all the time. I'm active on Twitter and Facebook on promoting Ukrainian cause. But on the part of the state, obviously, the government gave another round of military support. But something I think we discussed that what we can do more also at the NATO meeting in Vilnius. And one suggestion was brought up by Lithuanian analyst. We raised some options, but one of the options that seems most credible is to have in some elements potentially Europeans or the coalition of willing on the ground. And Poland has started with that in terms of repair services. Private companies repairing, not taking the equipment to Lithuania and Poland, which takes a lot of time. And transportation and the border crossing is still, problematic. I was there in November in Lviv. And the second you mentioned mining, demining. There are conflict areas, fighting areas, but there are also relatively safe areas where mining can be done. I have been in pioneer forces of the Defense League. Practical experience is valuable. The third training area which Estonia has provided is sniping, training snipers. Could those elements be provided, not necessarily on the front line in the Zaporozhye area or near Bakhmut, but some areas that are less impacted by the fighting? Is that something that potentially can be considered by not necessarily the NATO? Obviously, Americans are very concerned how it would look like and what are the potential, and the Germans, of course. But a coalition of the willing, could they be providing not necessarily boots on the ground, but the trainers, even from private companies or the willing volunteers to do that with the state funding and state organization? And we being initiative takers with the artillery, is that something to think about? Thank you.
So I will start to answer, and then Artur, you can continue or add. I picked up a few things. First, maintenance and repairing. Ukrainians have built it in lines. So the first maintenance repair, if it's possible, they do in the front line. The next one is 30 to 40 kilometers away. And then the next one, actually, to bring something to Poland from south front, it's 800 kilometers. So it's like from Tallinn to Warsaw. Can you imagine that? Just from need to repair your Tesla, you are bringing it from Tallinn to Helsinki. It's already far. From Tallinn to Warsaw to repair your Leopard tank, actually, which is absolutely nice if this support is there. But Ukrainians themselves saying the best option is if you have your engineers and technicians on the ground. That's why they are implementing this 3D printing of spare parts as well. They are super happy about those nations, and there are nations who are sending their technicians to repair and lesson learn how their howitzers are working, how their armored vehicles are working. Training, absolutely necessary, because you are losing people. If you are losing six times less people than Russians, you are still losing them. Russians are losing 600 people a day. You are losing 6 times less, that means 100 people. So 1 week, it's 700 people you have lost, actually. So you need to train new people. And in that sense, they are absolutely thankful for UK, for European nations, for Estonians to train them here. Because it's like for them a safe rare, where you don't need to worry about whether you put 30 plus people in one garrison to sleep actually in the same place. Year ago in the spring, they lost 2 times a huge amount of people because they didn't follow that order that you are not putting more than 30 people sleeping in the same building. So training in our territory, they are very, very thankful. Of course, smaller units training there, they have turned to us as well, but that's where the mics are on. I'm not continuing. Seeing you, I always think about energy as well. And I know I'm arguing against someone with the attitude that I'm saying nuclear power saved Ukraine last winter. So someone coming and saying that it's not safe, I argue against that, because even Russians are not so stupid that they will start to bomb nuclear power plants. More than half of the electricity last winter came from Ukrainian nuclear power plants. So beyond wind energy, I believe also in nuclear energy.
I would also elaborate on that question, that why is the coalition of the willing in Ukraine, people from the West coming to Ukraine voluntarily repairing Ukrainian broken tanks and infantry fighting vehicles. Issue might also be that in the West there is the safety of NATO. Russia still has not dared to officially attack NATO ground, and building up the infrastructure, building up the warehouses, bringing all of the spare parts by the thousands, that is immediately a target of Russian cruise missiles, Kinzhals and Kaliber missiles. So to bring that to Ukraine would give Russia an ability to destroy it more easily. So perhaps that is one of the obstacles, but I love the idea, of course, to bring it closer to the fight, because crossing the border, as you said, it's quite tedious, it takes a lot of time, and it definitely adds days to the Leopard repairment process. But I think the fact that Russia still has cruise missiles that are accurate enough to eliminate these warehouses where the repairments would happen, that is a huge problem in my eyes, at least. Any more questions?
You mentioned in the beginning that, this is post-war, right? That there will be reparations, and this is, of course, well established in common practice after wars. Now, that's based on international law, which is ultimately, exercised by the UN Security Council, which, of course, is completely dysfunctional. So, are we thinking about the UN, 2.0, or is it 3.0, or maybe 4.0? Let's go with 4.0. Are we rebuilding that?
Well, I think Ukraine's victory will give us excellent possibility to reform United Nations and Security Council as well. I know that our allies who are sitting in the Security Council are more conservative about that. Again, a question for our fellow ambassadors. Maybe not. But definitely, well, if we are talking about Ukrainian victory, we have to talk about Russia losing. And we don't want losers in the Security Council.
Thank you. My name is Thorir Guðmundsson, and I'm from Iceland. Artur, thank you for the video channel. It's my go-to place if I don't have time to read up on everything that's happened during the day. And you talked about the fog of war. You shine a piece of light through that fog, and that's public service. That is much appreciated. I want to ask Ambassador Kuusk about the global consequences of not only Ukraine's victory, but then also Russia's losing the war, as you mentioned. And these are, we can think about the consequences for a rising China, losing a strong ally. We can think about the consequences for Africa. You've talked about that. Consequences for Russia's malevolent influence in the world, with information campaigns, corrupting elections, etc. Do you see a possibility in Russia of a change of course, or are they going to be bitter, dangerous losers?
Thank you very much, and I want to thank Iceland first of all. That's also an excellent example of what, as I love to say, compact countries can do. They recognize Estonia as the first country who did it, and we are forever grateful for that. Iceland joined our Nordic Baltic working group in Kiev as well. It was Nordic Baltic 7, NB7. We joked, now it's NB8 because Iceland started to work from Warsaw together, and we are competing with G7. And we have one more already in our team, so challenge for G7. With a question, well, from our Estonian perspective, if I now got it right, it's a question about whether weak Russia can be more dangerous. No, we don't see it like that. Estonia has suffered only then when Russia has been too strong. During the history, always. So, as my previous boss, previous head of Estonian Foreign Intel said, we prefer to see rat cornered, not jumping around and destroying the kitchen.
And you asked also if Russia would be a bitter loser. They have nuclear weapons, so how does a country lose with nuclear weapons? Well, the answer is they can't. So that is, I guess, also a little bit...
Still possible, actually. Technically, they lost in Afghanistan at the end of 80s.
Was the pulling out of that also a goodwill gesture?
Well, they wanted to label it like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like they will lose, and for their own people, they were always painted as we were the good guys. We pulled out because we want to save Ukrainian lives. So in their eyes of Russian people, Russian government will do everything to not look like a loser. So
nukes didn't help them to avoid collapse of Soviet Union and getting us our freedom back.
True, and as you said, is a strong Russia more dangerous to Estonia and the neighboring countries than a weak Russia? Well, the dangers of weak Russia might be the outspread of violence or gang violence or mafia wars, whichever would be happening in a weak Russia. But as you said, a strong Russia is many times, I think, incomparably more dangerous to all of the neighboring countries. So my attitude is the same, that Russia needs to lose this war.
More questions?
There was an article this week in Foreign Affairs stating that this timeline for Ukraine joining NATO is too ambiguous and political will is not strong enough, and eventually we don't know what will happen. So the proposal was maybe we should provide some other security assurances comparable maybe to those of Israel and South Korea. So my question is that something that is being discussed on a serious scale among administrations, and how is it being seen in Ukraine? Thank you.
From Ukrainian perspective, they want NATO because that's the security guarantee in this corner of the world against Russia, which gives you the security guarantee. As well, their head of the Security Council have said that what's the alternative? We will acquire nukes, and then already answering that question as well. That they know we are not doing that. The Israel model weakness for Ukraine is exactly the same. Israel has nukes. So all the other security guarantees, what the G7 promised and the nations are joining now, that will help Ukraine to feel safe and to fight the war, to win the war, and help to join the NATO. That's the security guarantee. What they see that matches our view in Estonia.
And how different would the world or the war be right now if Ukraine still would have the nukes they gave away with the agreement in the 90s? I mean, a lot of people seem to forget, I guess, that Ukraine was a nuclear power after the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Hi, my name is Eva. I'm from Narva. I'm initially from a family of Ukrainian migrants, and I was wondering, the topic of the discussion is the Ukrainian victory and the global consequences. I'm going to take a step back from that, if you allow me. And we do have a Russian-speaking minority here in Estonia. What I was thinking is, what are going to be the consequences of the Russian-speaking minority, seeing essentially something so crucially important to them, Russia, and all the cultural, all the social, maybe economic connections to Russia, seeing all of that collapse. So is it a threat that is being considered? Is it something that the ministries, maybe the local municipalities, local municipalities are not the field of our topic, but from the ministry's perspective, are those threats being considered, and not threats, if not threats, then risks? Thank you.
Recently, really good article was written by Victoria Ladynskaya, and that's about how she, as Russian, feels at the moment, and she divided the thing. The Russians who are bearing the seed of empire, and the ones who are getting rid of that. So for me, that's the same with Russian culture. The culture which prizes the empire is actually, those are the milestones or road marks to mark their territory of the empire. So we still have definitely a people amongst Russians, maybe even amongst some Estonians, I don't know, who still are the sympathizers of the Russian Empire. But this will be gone. I mean, the empire will be gone, and then we have to help them to cope with those feelings. My grandfather was Ukrainian, so well, good to see Ukrainians inside the audience as well.
Any more questions? Yes, please. Yes, please. I was thinking of. The microphone doesn't work.
Hold it far enough away. George Kent, U.S. Ambassador. I will be on stage with the British Ambassador at 8 o'clock telling you why the rest of the world thinks Estonia is a wonderful place.
That's a good advertising, actually. Well,
we were invited. We didn't set the topic. To answer your question, Artur, I think as a also friend of Ukraine who served 6 years in Ukraine, if you had asked me 2 years ago or even 18 months ago, would it be possible that the U.S. would give $43 billion of military assistance in 18 months, I would say you were crazy. Obviously the need is great. Ukrainians have the right to demand more. I think actually when you get to your question about logistics, it's mind-boggling if we can't comprehend what $300 billion means in monetary terms. It's very difficult for any of us to understand how to move $43 billion of military equipment from the U.S. to Ukraine. It's happened in 18 months. Anyone who's visited Rzeszów, Poland, can see in practicality what you're asking. There is a huge logistical train of material coming from all around the world, going through mainly Poland and into Ukraine. And if you noticed how quickly between the announcement of cluster munitions to use of cluster munitions in southern Ukraine, what you saw was a demonstration that it's not rhetoric, it's real. And so when an announcement gets made, items are on the front and being used within a week. So I think it's, again, going back to my point, I will accept that Ukrainians have the moral right to ask for more, but I think we've also seen the logistics in operation. I think actually if we're looking at the global consequences, one of the bigger issues is not logistics, but production. I think that as NATO countries, Estonia, the US, UK, Norway, we weren't just fighting wars against insurgents in Iraq and Afghanistan. We weren't just reducing the size of our armies in particular. We were demilitarizing our industrial base. And that actually allowed all of our countries to have that dividend, devoting resources to better standards of living in our countries. But what it's also shown us is that we don't have the capacity to develop and produce the items that we all need, that Ukraine needs and is using, and we need potentially in the future at scale. And that industrial element of warfare was always there. The US called itself the arsenal of democracy in World War II, in part because we had that production. And that is lost, and we have to recover it. I think Estonia has been a thought leader within the European Union, not only saying that EU countries need to give Ukraine 1 million 155 millimeter shells, but need to invest $1 billion in production. And that's not just a Ukraine-focused issue, that's our issue, and potentially it's an issue in the Indo-Pacific Taiwan Strait scenario. So my focus would be more on our collective need to improve our productive capacity. The logistics, I think, actually are there.
Thank you for that answer, and it's a very good rhetoric that yes, 2 years ago, if anybody would have told even me that $43 billion would be moving to Ukraine in 18 months, I wouldn't believe myself. It's, yeah, the amount is insanely large, and we cannot imagine 300 billion, well, it's 1/6 of it. So if more time goes by, the amount by USA given to Ukraine is close to the Russian frozen assets in the US or in the EU. So it is more about logistics, yes, producing the munitions, for example.
The same with us, actually. Well, 400 million military aid for Estonia is significant, actually. I couldn't believe taking the job that in 2 years' time I need to help 43,000 landmines, anti-tank mines to cross the Polish-Ukrainian border to help our Ukrainian friends, actually. So, well, those things you can't foresee, that's for sure. China was mentioned. I think that was a part of the question from Icelandic representative as well. That's an interesting question, and China is a tricky player. They are definitely confused, maybe getting over of the confusion that smaller countries are able to withstand the attack. For China, Taiwan is the same as Ukraine is for Russia. And for some period, I think, now personally think, that China probably didn't recognize the independence fully. The countries which got independence back or got their independence from Russian Empire, 1991. If you think the Chinese ambassador in France out sayings about that as well. So they pulled back. They have starting to get over of this confusion, but it is exactly, that's the example how now Ukraine is repelling the attack, what China is learning in its policy towards Taiwan. So it's the global war in that sense.
Yeah, I think this war for China is also scaringly eye-opening because their goal, in their own words, has been to, in the brackets, unify then China and to claim and occupy Taiwan as part of mainland China. And they're seeing that a smaller country can withstand an attack for a lengthened period of time, and with Western support, unified Western support, can actually fight back, take territory back, liberate their own territory. And Taiwan is even more militarized right now, with the United States invested very heavily into it militarily, Japan being a close ally, Australia. I think for China this is a very eye-opening situation, that the situation with Taiwan is proving to be much more dangerous and difficult for them than they thought before. It's I think they have to remake their plans or secret plans, seeing how Ukraine and Russia are playing out.
That's the trick part, is that they might accept that Russia is not winning, but they are probably not accepting Russia losing. But that's the trick part, I think, for the free world, not only for Ukraine.
Because for China, China would prefer a unified Russia to trade with, to get cheap oil from, to get cheap gas from. They would not like a broken Russia. They have their own interest in the eastern Siberian areas, but they're walking a very thin line of balance.
It's not only about China who is afraid of what comes after Ukrainian victory. I think those feelings we can recognize also sometimes in West as well, actually, because war already for someone means stability. What comes after victory is unknown, and that people usually are afraid of unknowns.
It is weird how right now the war is the status quo. And when the war ends, it's a little bit more scary. What's happened to the biggest country in the world with nuclear weapons when they lose this war? What kind of instability and confusion and chaos is going to come from that country? If I think about it, I get the notion of scare. So, yeah. We have a question.
Thank you. Aside from all the global help and all the military help, all the political help, how, as simple citizens from Western Europe, how can we help Ukraine the best way, or how should we help Ukraine?
The first, demand your government to help Ukraine more and not to let this fall off the table because of the exhaustion. We all get tired, Ukrainians as well, but Ukrainians' tiredness means that they want the victory quicker, not that they will abandon the question. So demand your governments. Second, support voluntary organizations. There are very good Ukrainian organizations. For example, United 24. Reliable organizations are every country has, actually, which does the good thing on the ground in Ukraine. So that's the bit what I'm, as a citizen of Estonia, doing myself as well, every month, donating at least a little bit beyond those work what we do as a state servants, a military blogger. So that's my advice. If you don't know whom to ask, friends. So someone knows someone who works and make this good work reliable and trustworthy way, actually.
I would add to that perhaps that maybe you're already doing it, maybe everybody is doing it and getting maybe even tired of it, but keep an eye on the events happening in this war, because Russia's goal, Russian narrative is for the Western people to get tired, to get tedious, not to watch or follow this war, not to follow the events and go on with their lives. Russia would really love that, because then they can do all of the atrocities without people seeing it and talking about it. And also they have their own narrative, which is, and I think one of the biggest things also is to follow the Western narrative, follow the Ukrainian narrative, and to keep an eye and be knowledgeable about this war. With the knowledge, I think one is already fighting the Russian narrative and the Russian goal of keeping people in the dark, like they do in Russia. So just by knowing about it, just by being here, for example, I think you're already doing quite a lot. A question.
Hi, I'm Malle Hellam from the Open Estonia Foundation, and our foundation has been with Ukraine in minds and deeds, starting from 2000, from Orange Revolution, let's say, and throughout the Revolution of Destiny, of the dignity, and now, of course. But my question regards the decision of President Zelensky to dismiss all the heads of regional military how they call it, commissariats, all the heads in Ukraine. How do you comment this decision of the president of Ukraine?
Just that's fresh news, or
it is, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
At the moment, so well, that's the CNN factor I'm calling. You are not able to comment everything what's happening, but what now I'm guessing what is behind that. There have been corruption cases discovered recently in those so-called recruitment offices, regional ones. Probably, now I think probably they discovered a network there and then they cracked it. So that's the Zelensky's and his current team more or less attitude that they will not, they are not tolerating corruption at all if they know about that. But it's my, without seeing the news, without knowing the background, just a comment. Can give you one example. There's one oblast we are, and it's not Zhytomyr, where we are focusing our reconstruction. Another oblast, and Zelensky put there a new governor. That's the head of the official name is head of the civilian military administration, to counterbalance a mayor, powerful mayor. And well, that was criticized by opposition. And then I talked with my fellow diplomat who is active in that oblast. And I asked that, seeing what happened, they put a new governor there to counterbalance the mayor. Is mayor corrupt? Because usually if you don't catch him well immediately with the evidences, you try to counterbalance it. That's the way government's trying to do it with admin means. And this fellow diplomat said that, well, I don't know whether it is so serious. During the wartime, the mayor just gave the city car to his wife to use, actually. Is it so serious corruption during the wartime? So they are fighting the corruption, even those, so to say, tiny ones. I was surprised when my fellow diplomat described that it's, well, not so serious things, but where you draw the line then. So, yeah, my immediate comment, probably some kind of network they wanted to crack.
I would also assume, I haven't seen the news yet, but it's very interesting. I will definitely read it, but I assume it's a fight against corruption. And if in the EU they will discover some cases of corruption, they will lay off some people, they will launch an investigation. Well, Ukraine is at war, and the Western countries are. Some of the countries, well, some of the people are saying, oh, Ukraine is corrupt. What are they doing? What is Zelensky doing to fight against it? These strong actions, you can make soft choices or hard choices. Zelensky has chosen very hard choices when it comes to fight with corruption. Massive layoffs, massive firings of people, exchanging people with power. And I think with that, Zelensky also sends a very strong message to the Western countries that we are dealing with this problem. You can see I'm making strong steps. The country is changing, it keeps the heat flowing. So I'm assuming it's a fight against corruption. And if it is, I would see this as a very strong step against corruption and a message to the Western countries also.
Any more questions?
Yeah, so my question is about the Ukrainian digital state. So they have done a lot to develop their digital services over the last couple of years. And but you're one of the few people here who has actually lived in Ukraine. So can you comment on how like advanced the digital services are in Ukraine compared to, say, Estonia? Thank you.
I waited for that question, actually. That's the success story of Ukraine, and we can say that we Estonians have part of that as well. In 2019, Zelensky got power, and he took an advisor, Fyodorov, IT entrepreneur from Zaporizhia, who came in June this year to Estonia, took the notes, several notebooks full of notes how Estonia has built its e-government, went back. They started from zero IT ministry, and they started from zero state in a smartphone. That's the app is called Dia. And it was started in a startup way. Zelensky promised that if you show me the results, you will get the budget. So the first year budget to launch ministry and the Dia was 1 million, and then they got more because they showed result. The biggest compliment is that we Estonians now we are taking this Dia. We, in a simplified way, we translate it into Estonia, call it mobile state. And we will launch it in a couple of months' time, saying it's our next step in our e-government. So, Ukrainians are proud and we are proud because we, teached the father of Dia in Ukraine. They have boomed in this amount of users of this Dia. So you have everything in your smartphone. The passport, driving licenses, you can give a signature as well with that already. It has boomed to 19 million users. So COVID helped, but also the large-scale war helped. 19 million users of Dia app. They want to make a step in e-elections as well. They have turned to us to train how to do it. In security-wise, their app is secure to do that. We calm them down, saying that it took Estonia also quite many years to reach results what we have at the moment. That more than half of Estonians are giving their votes in elections using the e-election thing. I myself voted from Polish hotel when I was driving from Tallinn to Kiev. That's marvelous, and they know how to show it for others, for diplomats as well. When we came out of this showroom where Fyodorov did it, it was like a rock concert actually. And the German ambassador said that someone has to show this in Berlin as well. They can start their e-government maybe after that too.
Kaimo, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't it, if Zelensky was elected and assumed power in the office, the Ministry of Digital Transformation was established on his order?
Yep. From zero.
In the name already, the digital transformation
ministry. Yeah,
a beautiful name.
So and the head of that is in the position is higher. He's a first deputy prime minister as well, actually. So they give this big attention and big weight, and they use our slogan somehow that it can help them to fight corruption as well, because computers and smartphones don't have a hole where to put cash in actually to bribe someone.
If I may, I'll ask a quick question. As we started talking about corruption, I thought that I was talking to a good friend of mine from Ukraine who was visiting Estonia, an architect from Kiev, and she said that the biggest threat at this point, or the most likely potential to realize, is actually all the funds that flow and the people not being able to kind of overcome their inner moral choice to step away from the corruption. So my question is related to what are the steps that are being taken to sort of help Ukrainians finalize the judicial reform that was initially launched by Mr. Zelensky when he assumed the power. So how can we be of more help in order to make sure that those who will be or are trying to somehow unlawfully take the money that is being brought through different means for the success and for the victory and kind of steal it, what can we do to help the judicial establishments in Ukraine to fight that and to prevent this moral corruption to take over the mindset, the winning mindset in Ukrainians? Thank you.
I think there's quite a lot of laws have been passed, commissions have been formed, commissions are working actually, which are choosing new judges and semi-international commission. Estonian Lovely Perling is part of that, for example. It has done a great job. We have helped to train NABU, which is the Ukrainian Anti-Corruption Bureau. And we have trained their case officers actually with operational work. And we have done it very well. The result of that we saw in May when the NABU catched the head of the Supreme Court with $2.7 million bribe. The tragical and comical case in that news was that the money came from oligarch, Ukrainian one, who lives in France. So there are some toxic oligarchs who are in Western Europe, Firtash in Austria, Zhevago in France. The money came from France, and France court is not giving this oligarch to Ukraine, who is demanding it. And the excuse is that it's too dangerous to give oligarch to Ukraine because Russian missiles are flying and it can threaten the life of the oligarch. At the same time, France has its embassy opened in Kiev. So I think from the West, we can do also more to demand from our governments that those oligarchs or their money or the change of those oligarchs' money, toxic oligarchs living abroad, are not reaching back to Ukraine or not reaching our own officials. So we are not flawless as well, but we can achieve the results together as Estonian prosecutor office in cooperation with Ukrainian ones catched the former health minister of Ukraine recently and some Estonian entrepreneurs also who helped this former health minister to steal some money in a simplified way, actually. So cooperation is the key word here, I think.
There's another question in the front.
Sorry for the second question, but it's more comment than question. Because talking about Ukraine's victory, we should always remind that there is a very strong component in Ukraine which contributes to the victory. This is Ukrainian civil society. And there are, I am absolutely thrilled how professional are they. And there are tens of strong organizations fighting corruption. And if you want to help them, donate them to continue and carry out their work. They are really professional, and we here should work from them how to be a good civil society organization, how to influence and impact the policy making, and how to really engage people in your work. So, Slava Ukraini.
And I totally agree, actually. That's the country of the free people.
Also, civil society, it's if you look at NABU, which is organization to fight corruption in Ukraine, it's basically the government creating a government entity that watches the government and watches the people in power. So it's you watching yourself in the mirror. But the most basic thing that is the civil society, the people in the country who can fight this corruption. So as we have seen authoritarian states create anti-corruption entities and they don't work. Decades of work and they become corrupt themselves. We saw it in the 90s in Russia, actually, when oligarchs took power and Yeltsin created an anti-corruption entity in Russia and it became corrupt. So in Ukraine, I think civil society is also the biggest answer next to NABU.
That's the feeling of ownership. Ukrainians year after year, day by day, and now the large-scale war has grown in this feeling of ownership of your country. So everybody in Estonia, I think, or most of us, feel that we own at this piece of our country, actually. And then you are not stealing, because you're not stealing from your own bank account, usually, at least, I think. With that positive note, do we have time for one more question, or
The last question, perhaps? We have one question.
I just wanted to ask about the latest developments in the cyber front. So how well is Ukraine lately doing in fighting against cyber attacks?
Well, I think they are doing rather well. They have survived, and also not alone, but also with the help of others in cooperation of other states, but also biggest companies in the world. They survived the major attacks in January 22. Immediately after that, as well, in February. There have been combined attacks against their power plants, SCADA systems, and they have managed to survive that. So when first it was more destruction, now I know Russians trying to steal more information, but they are doing very, very well. So it's impressive. They are a nation of engineers and IT specialists as well. Before the large-scale war, yearly 18,000 students graduated IT schools. So they have capability, manpower to do that. So, but once again, I stress that's in cooperation. We have helped them with training, cyber training grounds. I mean, Estonians through EU as well, other nations too. So, they are good.
All right, this was the last question, and I would like to thank all of the question askers and all of the people who listened to this panel. I had a very good time talking and discussing this, and also the viewers who are watching this later, thank you for watching this very long episode for you. And I would also like to thank the Estonian Foreign Ministry for giving me the opportunity to do this. And I would like to thank you, Kaimo, for coming and talking.
Me võidame, me peremožemo. We will win. Thank you, Artur, for excellent discussion, and the audience as well for answering the questions and asking questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Aitäh.